Imagine a killer so silent, it wiped out half of Europe. A plague so gruesome, victims turned black as charcoal. And a virus so contagious, it locked down the entire world. This is the story of humanity's deadliest enemies. Not wars, not disasters, but invisible pandemics. From the mysterious plague of Athens to the nightmare of COVID-19, we've faced horrors that reshaped history. Some struck in months, others lurked for centuries. And they're not done yet. Stick around, because history's greatest epidemics are more terrifying than fiction. In the heart of the Peloponnesian War, as Athens clashed with Sparta, another enemy struck, one the Athenians couldn't fight with swords. The plague of Athens erupted in 430 BCE, possibly typhoid or typhus, no one truly knows. It began with a high fever, bloody throat, and unbearable thirst. Victims collapsed in the streets. Even famed historian Thucydides, who survived it, wrote of chaos, as social order broke down and corpses lay unburied. The plague claimed 25% of the population, including Pericles, Athens' greatest leader. As the city weakened from within, its enemies outside gained the upper hand. The plague of Athens didn't just kill bodies, it crippled a civilization and may have sealed its fate in the war. A timeless reminder, in war, disease can be the deadliest weapon of all. At the height of the Roman Empire, its legions returned victorious from the east, carrying not just riches, but something far more deadly. The Antonine Plague, likely smallpox, swept through the empire around 165 CE, causing fever, skin pustules, and severe diarrhea. It tore through cities and armies alike, killing an estimated 5 to 10 million people, including the Stoic Emperor Marcus Aurelius himself. The plague didn't just infect bodies, it infected confidence. The once mighty Roman army was crippled, trade routes collapsed, and the empire's economy faltered. Rome's enemies saw an opening, and internal instability grew. Many historians believe this plague marked the beginning of Rome's long decline. A global power, undone in part by a microscopic invader. Proof that even empires are vulnerable to nature's smallest threats. In the year 541 CE, terror swept through the Byzantine Empire. The plague of Justinian, one of the first recorded pandemics, emerged from the east, carried by fleas riding on rats. It spread like wildfire through Constantinople, causing high fever, swollen lymph nodes, and deadly gangrene. At its peak, the plague claimed as many as 50 million lives, nearly half the population of Constantinople. Entire cities were paralyzed, farms were abandoned, the empire weakened, changing the balance of power in medieval Europe. This was not just a health crisis, it was a turning point in human history. Between 1347 and 1351, the world witnessed one of the deadliest pandemics in human history, the Black Death. Originating from Central Asia, the plague traveled along trade routes, carried by fleas on rats and through infected respiratory droplets. What followed was unimaginable horror, buboes, blackened skin, and victims coughing blood. Europe was hit hardest, losing 30 to 60% of its population. In total, as many as 200 million people may have died across Europe, the Middle East, Asia, and North Africa. The consequences reshaped the world. Feudalism crumbled, economies crashed, and survivors demanded more rights, fueling peasant revolts and a new. In the mid-1500s, as Spanish colonizers tightened their grip on central Mexico, an even deadlier force emerged, the coca-littly epidemic. Between 1545 and 1548, a mysterious disease swept through the indigenous population. Though its exact cause remains debated, many believe it was a viral hemorrhagic fever, possibly linked to salmonella. The symptoms were brutal: bleeding from the eyes and mouth, high fever, and yellowed skin from jaundice. The death toll was staggering, an estimated 5 to 15 million lives lost, wiping out nearly 80% of Mexico's native population. The epidemic didn't just bring death, it shattered Aztec society, accelerating the collapse of indigenous resistance and paving the way for Spanish domination. The coca-littly epidemic stands as a tragic reminder of how disease, weaponized by conquest, changed the fate of entire civilizations. In 1665, the bustling streets of London fell silent as the Great Plague swept through the city. Once again, rat fleas carrying the bubonic plague ignited a deadly outbreak. Victims suffered from painful buboes, fever, and intense delirium. Many died within days. Over the course of a single year, the plague claimed the lives of around 100,000 people, 1 in every 5 Londoners. Red crosses were painted on doors, and cries of "Lord have mercy" echoed in the streets. Bodies were buried in mass graves, and entire neighborhoods were sealed off in quarantine. But this tragedy also became a turning point. It spurred the development of public health systems, sanitation improvements, and a better understanding of urban disease control. The Great Plague of London was one of the city's darkest chapters, but also the beginning of modern public health. Between 1817 and 1923, the world endured 7 major cholera pandemics, each wave spreading death across continents, from India to Europe, the Americas, and Africa. Caused by the bacterium Vibrio cholerae, cholera spread through contaminated water, especially in overcrowded cities with poor sanitation. Victims suffered violent diarrhea, rapid dehydration, and in many cases, death within hours. Without treatment, the fatality rate could reach 50%. Millions perished. But from this devastation came progress. The cholera outbreaks pushed cities to develop modern sewer systems and gave birth to the science of epidemiology, thanks in part to pioneers like John Snow, who traced outbreaks to polluted water sources. The cholera pandemics were a public health disaster, but they also triggered one of the greatest transformations in how we manage water, hygiene, and disease. As World War I drew to a close, a deadlier enemy emerged. One that didn't carry a weapon but claimed more lives than the war itself: the Spanish flu. Caused by the H1N1 influenza virus, likely of avian origin, this pandemic moved with terrifying speed. Victims turned blue from cyanosis, developed severe pneumonia, and often died within days. Uniquely, it struck young adults hardest, those in the prime of life, leading to 50 million deaths worldwide, and possibly more. With hospitals overwhelmed and no vaccines or antibiotics available, cities collapsed under the weight of mass illness. Entire families vanished. The Spanish flu left lasting scars, not just in cemeteries, but in public health policy, global cooperation, and even the collective trauma of a world that had just survived a war. In 1957, the world braced for another deadly wave. This time, the Asian flu, caused by a new strain of the H2N2 influenza virus, born from a genetic mix of bird and human flu viruses. The outbreak began in southern China, quickly spreading across Asia, then to the United States, Europe, and beyond. Symptoms were classic flu, fever, body aches, and in severe cases, pneumonia, but the scale was global. Over 1 to 2 million people died, a stark reminder that the age of pandemics wasn't over. Though not as deadly as the Spanish flu, the Asian flu brought something new: international coordination. It marked the first time global surveillance systems were mobilized to monitor and respond to an influenza outbreak. The 1957 pandemic wasn't just a health crisis. It was a rehearsal for the modern world's battle against viral threats. In 1981, doctors began reporting rare infections in healthy young men. It was the first sign of what would become one of the most devastating pandemics in modern history, HIV/AIDS. Caused by a virus believed to have crossed from primates to humans, HIV attacked the immune system, leaving people vulnerable to opportunistic infections and cancers. With no cure and a near 100% fatality rate before treatment, the disease spread silently and globally. Over 40 million lives have been lost, and the fight continues. But the pandemic's toll was not just medical. It exposed deep social stigma, sparked fear, and devastated entire communities, especially in sub-Saharan Africa. Yet it also drove change, from sexual health education to global activism, and eventually to life-saving antiretroviral therapy. The HIV/AIDS crisis reminded us that pandemics can strike not only the body, but also the soul of society, and that compassion, not just medicine, is part of the cure. In 2014, a deadly virus emerged from the forest of Guinea, the Ebola virus, likely transmitted from bats. What followed was the largest Ebola outbreak in history, devastating Liberia, Sierra Leone, and neighboring countries. Ebola caused horrific symptoms: vomiting, internal bleeding, and organ failure. With a fatality rate of up to 90%, fear spread faster than the virus. Hospitals were overwhelmed. Patients died in isolation, and health workers wore hazmat suits, often becoming victims themselves. The outbreak exposed glaring gaps in global preparedness, but also triggered an unprecedented response from local volunteers to international medical teams and experimental vaccines. Though over 11,000 lives were lost, the crisis reshaped how the world responds to emerging diseases, one of the harshest lessons in pandemic response. In late 2019, a mysterious illness began spreading in Wuhan, China: fever, cough, and in some, severe pneumonia. The world would soon come to know it as COVID-19, caused by a novel coronavirus, SARS-CoV-2, likely from a bat. It ignited a global pandemic unlike any in living memory. Within months, entire countries shut down. Lockdowns, border closures, and empty streets became the new normal. As the virus evolved, from the deadly Delta variant to the hyper-contagious Omicron, over 7 million lives were lost. But amid the chaos came breakthroughs. Scientists developed mRNA vaccines in record time, ushering in a new era of medicine. COVID-19 didn't just challenge healthcare, it tested economies, politics, and human resilience.